The galaxy wasn't kind. It was vast, indifferent, and carved by the slow, brutal logic of survival. For millennia, the ascendancy of Kinthar, a coalition of 6 silicon-based species, unified under the crystalline philosophy of harmonious order, had expanded its influence like a slow-spreading frost across the spiral arms. Their fleets, sleek obsidian shards humming with resonant energy, moved with chilling precision. Their worlds gleamed with geometric perfection, cities sculpted from living rock and light, humming with the quiet hum of absolute control. Order was paramount. Predictability was safety. Chaos was anathema. A disease to be excised. And then they found Sol. Not a beacon of civilization, but a flickering, chaotic ember on the galactic rim. A single unremarkable yellow star cradling a single unremarkable blue-green world. Scans revealed primitive radio chatter, atmospheric pollution, orbital debris fields thick as asteroid belts. A death world. The Kiratefi term, translated roughly, meant planet of unstable biology and unpredictable aggression. Their initial assessment was clinical, dismissive, a biological anomaly, perhaps, a curiosity to be catalogued, contained, and ultimately neutralized. Its inhabitants, Homo sapiens, were deemed inefficient, emotionally volatile, prone to self-destruction, barely sentient by Kirafi standards. Resources were finite. Such chaotic nodes were liabilities, not assets. They sent the Harmony's resolve. A vessel of observation and, if necessary, quiet correction. Its commander, High Overseer Vrikal, observed Earth from the cold void. Through the ship's multispectral lenses, he saw cities that sprawled like fungal growths, not the clean lines of Kateri spires. He saw vehicles swarming in chaotic patterns, not the synchronized flows of Grabsov transports. He saw conflict, constant, messy human conflict flaring on every continent. Inefficient, wasteful, dangerous. His crystalline heart, a lattice of pure logic encased in biomineral, pulsed with cold certainty. This world needed pruning. A surgical strike. Minimal disruption to the galactic order. A demonstration of the consequences of unchecked chaos. On Earth, the sky tore open. It wasn't fire. Not at first. It was silence. A profound, unnatural silence that swallowed the roar of jets, the rumble of traffic, the very hum of the planet's power grids. Then the light, not the warm gold of dawn, but a cold, actinic blue that bleached the color from the world. It poured from a single impossible point in the heavens, a tear in reality itself widening with terrifying grace. From it emerged the Harmony's resolve. Not a ship as humans understood it, but a shard of obsidian night, kilometers long, its surface smooth and featureless, drinking the sunlight. It hung there, a silent, judgmental god. Panic, raw and primal, erupted. Not the organized panic of drills, but the gut-wrenching terror of the utterly unknown. Governments scrambled, militaries mobilized with trembling hands, scientists babbled theories into dead airwaves. The Qatari made no demands, no declarations. They simply observed. And then they acted. Target, Geneva, symbol of human cooperation. A single focused beam of resonant energy invisible to the naked eye lanced down. Not an explosion. A disassembly. The United Nations complex. The surrounding diplomatic quarter. The very bedrock beneath it. Reduced in an instant to a fine gray powder that drifted silently on the wind. No heat. No shockwave. Just absence. A perfect geometric crater where a city center had been. A message written in annihilation. The world held its breath. Then screamed. Commander Aristhorn stood on the cracked tarmac of what was left of Ramstein Air Base, the acrid tang of ozone and pulverized concrete thick in the air. Rain slicked his worn flight jacket, plastering dark hair to his forehead. His eyes, the color of storm clouds over the Atlantic, scanned the horizon where the obsidian shard still hung. A malevolent moon. He wasn't a politician, wasn't a scientist. He was a pilot, a weapon. And right now humanity's entire arsenal felt like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Status on the F-35s, Captain. His voice was gravel, worn smooth by too many near misses and too little sleep. Captain Lena Rostova. Her face smudged with grime but eyes sharp as flint, shook her head. Rainwater dripping from her chin. Vaughn, Commander. Mall 12. Flew straight into that thing like moths to a bug zapper. Sensors showed massive energy spikes, then nothing. Not even wreckage. She spat onto the wet concrete. They didn't even try to shoot back. Just dissolve. Thorne clenched his jaw, the muscle ticking. He'd seen the footage. The sleek jets, humanity's pride, vanishing into that cold blue light without a flicker of resistance. It wasn't war, it was extermination. Efficient, clinical, alien. Any word from NORAD? From anyone? He asked, though he knew the answer. Rostova's expression hardened. Global comms are patchy. Satellites are blind or dead. Last we heard, Beijing, Moscow, Washington. All hit, same pattern. Clean. Precise. Like they're cataloging us. Testing. She looked up at the silent shard, her voice dropping to a whisper laced with fury. What do they want? Horn didn't answer. He knew they wanted silence. They wanted order and humanity. With its messy emotions, its art, its wars, its imagination, was the ultimate noise. The ultimate chaos. He thought of his daughter Maya safe, in a bunker somewhere in the Canadian Rockies. He thought of the stories he'd read her, dragons, starships, heroes who defied impossible odds. Stories born of that very chaos the aliens despised. A bitter laugh escaped him. Imagination. Our greatest strength. And now, apparently, our death warrant. Aboard the Harmony's Resolve, High Overseer Vik Sarber Vik Hull reviewed the data streams. The dissolution of the designated chaotic nodes proceeded with optimal efficiency, minimal energy expenditure, maximum psychological impact on the remaining biomass. The primitive broadcasts had shifted from panic chatter to a low, mournful dirge, a predictable response to loss. Good. Fear was a useful tool for compliance. His second-in-command, Sub-Overseer Collarn, pulsed a query through the ship's resonant network. The biomass exhibits unexpected persistence. Varkal, scattered resistance attempts continue. Primitive kinetic projectiles, atmospheric combustion devices. Illogical, futile. Vrakal's crystalline facets shimmered with cold light. Persistence is merely inefficient energy expenditure. Collarn. A flaw in their biological programming. They cling to existence without understanding its proper structure. Observe the patterns. Note the locations of continued resistance. We will prune them systematically. Order must be restored. He focused his primary sensor array on a new cluster of anomalous energy signatures deep within the North American continent. Not military. Not industrial, faint, chaotic bursts of electromagnetic radiation interspersed with complex, non-repeating audio patterns. Music? Speech? Illogical noise. Yet, persistent, designating it for secondary observation. A minor anomaly, easily corrected. Unseen by the Kanthari sensors, deep within a repurposed Cold War bunker codenamed Project Prometheus, Dr. Alara Vance hunched over a flickering console. Her fingers flew across the keys, not inputting commands but composing. Lines of code scrolled, interspersed with fragments of poetry, snippets of old jazz records, equations for theoretical physics, and the haunting melody of a child's lullaby. Around her, a dozen other scientists, engineers, artists, and even a retired philosophy professor worked feverishly, not on weapons but on ideas. "They're watching us, Ilara," rasped Ben Carter, a wiry astrophysicist with eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "That shard, it just looked at this grid sector." Ilara didn't look up. Her voice was calm, almost serene, belying the storm of thought behind her eyes. Hell. Let them watch, Ben. Let them see the noise. Let them see the chaos. She tapped a key, sending a burst of synthesized whale song mixed with the Fibonacci sequence and a recording of a thunderstorm out into the ether. They think they understand us. They think we're just biology, instinct. They don't see the engine. She finally turned, her gaze intense, burning with a fierce, desperate hope. They don't see the imagination. Weeks bled into months. The Qatari pruning continued. Cities fell silent, reduced to geometric dust fields. Human resistance, fragmented and desperate, launched futile attacks. Tanks melted. Missiles dissolved mid-flight. Fighter jets vanished. The message was clear. Resistance is dissolution. Hope withered like a plant in a vacuum. But in the hidden places, the deep bunkers, the shielded valleys, the forgotten tunnels, something else grew. Not weapons of steel and fire, but weapons of thought. Project Prometheus became a beacon, not of light but of defiant creativity. They broadcast stories of impossible heroes, complex symphonies woven from static blueprints for machines that defied known physics, philosophical treatises on the nature of freedom. It was a cacophony of human spirit, a digital scream into the void. Horn, leading a ragged band of survivors scavenging for fuel and parts in the ruins of Berlin, found a discarded tablet. Its battery was nearly dead, but it played a final looping message from Prometheus. A child's voice singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," layered over the sound of a heartbeat and the crackle of a dying fire. He held it until the screen went black, the simple, defiant melody echoing in the hollow silence of the dead city. Imagination. The word felt like a lifeline. Aboard the Harmony's Resolve, Vrackle grew, unsettled. The anomalous broadcasts from the Prometheus sector were increasing in complexity and emotional resonance. They defied categorization. They triggered dissonance within the ship's harmonious resonant field, subtle fluctuations, minor system instabilities. The logical biomass should not generate such interference. He ordered a full tactical scan of the sector. Prepare for targeted dissolution. This persistent noise needed silencing. The Cathari beam lanced down towards the Rocky Mountains. Not the clean disassembly of Geneva, but a wider, more powerful pulse designed to scour the entire valley. Thorne, monitoring from a hidden observation post miles away, saw the telltale blue light bloom on the horizon. His heart stopped. Prometheus. No! The roar tore from his throat, raw and animal. He slammed his fist on the console, useless. He could do nothing. Watch his last hope, his daughter's last hope, turn to dust. But the light faltered. It didn't strike. It wavered, like a laser pointer hitting turbulent water. The beam flickered, sputtered, and then collapsed in on itself with a silent implosion of distorted energy. The obsidian shard in the sky visibly shuddered, a ripple passing through its perfect surface. Silence. Then, from the Prometheus bunker, a new broadcast erupted. Not music, not poetry. A single, clear, synthesized voice, speaking in flawless, resonant Cathari. We see you, Vodprico. We see your fear of the unknown, your terror of the unpredictable. Your order is a cage, and cages can be broken. High Overseer Vital recoiled as if struck. The voice, it spoke his name. It spoke truth. A cold dread, alien and terrifying, seeped into his crystalline core. How could they know? The biomass. It wasn't just noise. It was listening. It was thinking. It was imagining him. On the rain-lashed tarmac of a dead airfield, Eris Thorne stared at the sky, where the obsidian shard now pulsed with erratic, agitated light. A slow, fierce grin spread across his face, cutting through the grime and despair. "All right, you bastards," he whispered, the storm in his eyes igniting. "Let's play." The failed strike on Prometheus changed everything. The Conferi, masters of predictable, efficient annihilation, had encountered the unpredictable, the chaotic, the imagined. High Overseer Vrockal's crystalline composure cracked. Dissonance wasn't just a sensor reading anymore. It was a cold dread coiling in his core lattice. The biomass wasn't merely resisting, it was adapting. It was using its chaotic noise, its imagination as a weapon that bypassed their shields, disrupted their harmonics, and spoke directly into the hidden vulnerabilities of their ordered minds. Impossible. Bucca pulsed to Kalarn, his resonant frequency sharp with agitation. Their technology is primitive. Their understanding of resonant physics is negligible. This interference, it defies causality. Kalarn's response was hesitant, a rare tremor in his usual certainty. The broadcasts, they're called, they are not random. They contain patterns. complex, shifting patterns that resonate with our ship's foundational harmonics. It is as if they are composing counter-melodies to our existence. Composing. The word felt alien, dangerous. Composition implied intent, creativity, imagination. Rakthal accessed the intercepted Prometheus feed. He saw not schematics, but stories. A tale of a tiny seed cracking a mountain, a symphony built from the sounds of breaking glass and children's laughter. A mathematical proof demonstrating that absolute order inevitably leads to stagnation and death. Each piece was a needle probing for the hairline fractures in Cathari philosophy, and they were finding them. On Earth, the failed strike was a spark in the ashes. Hope, fragile but fierce, ignited. Thorn's ragged band swelled with survivors drawn by the impossible defiance from the mountains. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the idea of humanity, for the right to be messy, creative and gloriously, terrifyingly alive. Inside Prometheus, Alara Vance moved with a new urgency. The Cathari reaction confirmed her wildest, most terrifying hypothesis. Their technology, their very society was built on a foundation of resonant harmony, a perfect, unchanging frequency. Human imagination, with its chaotic bursts of creativity, its emotional dissonance, its constant reimagining of reality, was the ultimate counter-frequency. It wasn't about building a bigger gun, it was about composing a song that could shatter their crystal souls. "We need more," Alara said, her voice tight with exhaustion and exhilaration. She pointed to a holographic display showing the Cathari ship's fluctuating energy signature. "We disrupted their attack, but it was a glancing blow. We need to find the fundamental harmonic, the core frequency that holds their entire civilization together. If we can imagine a counter-resonance strong enough." Dan Carter wiped his glasses, his hands trembling. "Alara, that's like trying to find the one note that unravels the entire universe. Their tech is light years ahead." "Not their tech, Ben," Alara corrected, her eyes blazing. "Their belief, their order, that's the weak point. And belief is built on stories, on imagination." She turned to the room, her gaze sweeping over the artists, the scientists, the dreamers. "We don't need to understand their physics. We need to understand their fear. What terrifies a being that believes chaos is death? We need to imagine that." The Cathari response was swift and brutal. If targeted strikes failed, they would employ overwhelming force. The Harmony's resolve unleashed its primary resonant array, not on cities, but on the planet's very crust. Massive tectonic plates groaned under the strain. Volcanoes, dormant for millennia, erupted in synchronized fury. Tsunamis, perfectly timed and directed, scoured coastlines. The sky turned the color of bruised flesh. It was planetary-scale engineering, designed to render Earth uninhabitable, to crush the chaotic biomass beneath the weight of imposed catastrophic order. Humanity reeled. Millions died in the geological upheaval. Thaun's group barely escaped a collapsing mountain pass, the ground swallowing comrades whole. The broadcasts from Prometheus grew strained, punctuated by static and the distant roar of quakes. Despair threatened to drown the fragile hope, but Alara Vance saw opportunity in the chaos. The Qatari were revealing their hand. Their attack wasn't random destruction. It followed precise, predictable patterns based on geological fault lines and resonant frequencies of the planet's core. Predictable. In their attempt to impose ultimate order, they had created a pattern humanity could learn. "Then, map the seismic pulses," Alara yelled over the bunker's shuddering alarms. "Find the rhythm, the underlying harmonic driving the tectonic shifts." As Ben and his team frantically worked, Alara turned to the artists. "We need a story," she said, her voice cutting through the panic. "A story about a symphony conductor. But the orchestra is the planet itself, and the conductor is losing control because the musicians, the mountains, the oceans, the winds, they're starting to improvise." The artists exchanged stunned looks, then nodded, diving into their workstations. Lines of code merged with brushstrokes, musical notes, and poetic verse. They began composing a counter-narrative, a broadcast designed not to attack but to infect the Qatari perception, to make them feel the terrifying, exhilarating chaos of a world refusing to be conducted. Aboard the Harmony's Resolve, Rakal monitored the planetary restructuring. Order was being restored. The chaotic biomass would be eradicated by the very planet it had defiled. Satisfaction, cold and pure, began to replace the dissonance. Until the new broadcast hit, it started subtly. A slight tremor in the ship's resonant field that mirrored the tectonic shifts below. Then the imagery. Rakal's primary sensors, designed to perceive energy and structure, suddenly saw music. He saw the Himalayas not as rock but as a cello section, droning a deep, mournful note. He saw the Pacific Ocean as a vast choir, its waves crashing in complex, unpredictable harmonies. He saw the erupting volcanoes as brass instruments, blaring defiant fanfares of molten rock, and at the center a tiny, flickering figure, the conductor, desperately trying to impose a rigid score on an orchestra that was joyfully, terrifyingly making it up as they went along. The dissonance wasn't just in the ship's systems anymore. It was in him. A terrifying thought, alien and seductive, wormed its way into his crystalline logic. What if the chaos is beautiful? Skala. Kalarn's pulse was frantic. The harmonic instability is cascading. The planetary resonance is feeding back into our core matrix. We must cease the tectonic manipulation. Rakal hesitated. Cease? Admit the biomass's chaotic noise could disrupt their divine order. It was unthinkable. Yet, the dissonance was a physical pain, a grinding in his core. The image of the improvising orchestra wouldn't fade. He saw, for the first time, not just inefficient biology, but potential. A potential that terrified him more than any weapon. Cease, he pulsed, the command feeling like shards of glass in his throat. Cease the planetary restructuring. Full defensive harmonics. Isolate the Prometheus signal source. Prepare for direct engagement. Thorn watched the unnatural quakes subside, the volcanic fury ebb. The sky, though still choked with ash, began to clear. The sky, though still choked with ash, began to clear. The Qatari had backed down. Not out of mercy, but because they were afraid. Afraid of the song humanity was singing. He looked at the faces around him, gaunt, scarred, but alight with a fierce, hard-won hope. They'd done it. They'd made the gods flinch. But the victory was hollow. The cost was written in the ash-covered ruins, in the empty spaces where friends had stood. And the Qatari weren't gone. They were regrouping, preparing something worse. A priority signal crackled over Thorn's secure line, a direct feed from Prometheus. Alara's face appeared on the screen, pale but resolute.
Paladris.
We've found it. Found what? Thorn asked, his voice rough. The core harmonic, she said, her eyes holding his with unnerving intensity. The fundamental frequency of the Qatari ascendancy. It's not just a number, Aris. It's a story. Their creation myth, the moment their first crystalline ancestors achieved perfect harmony, silencing the chaotic energies of their homeworld. It's the bedrock of their entire civilization. Thorn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. And Alara took a deep breath. We can shatter it. We can compose a counter-resonance so powerful, so true to the chaos they fear, that it will unravel their harmony from the inside out. It will destroy their ship, and potentially their entire civilization. Silence, stretched, thick with the weight of genocide. Thorn saw the faces of his dead comrades. He saw Maya's smile. He saw the gray dust of Geneva. The Qatari had shown no mercy. Why should humanity? But then he remembered the child's lullaby on the dead tablet. The defiant whale song. The story of the seed cracking the mountain. Was this what humanity had become? Just another force of annihilation, mirroring the enemy. Alara, he began, his voice strained. Is there another way? Can we just make them leave? Alara's expression was tragic, resolute. They won't leave, Aris. Their philosophy demands the eradication of chaos. We are the ultimate chaos to them. Coexistence is illogical in their framework. This is the only language they understand, the language of resonance, of shattering. She looked away, her voice dropping. I know what it costs, but what's the cost of not doing it? Another Geneva? Another Berlin? The end of everything that makes us human? Before Thorne could respond, the comms panel lit up with a priority Canthari frequency. Not a broadcast, a direct hail. On the main view screen of the Harmony's Resolve, Brookall's crystalline form materialized, facets glinting with cold light, but his posture was different, less rigid. There was a tension in his structure, a subtle fracture. Human Commander, Brookal's synthesized voice resonated, devoid of its usual absolute certainty. It held something else. A tremor. Disediction, Thorne. We observe your persistence. Your noise. He paused, a long, static-filled silence that felt like an eternity. We offer terms. Thorne's heart hammered against his ribs. Terms? From the architects of Geneva. He exchanged a wary glance with Rostova. Cease your broadcasts. Varkal continued, the words seeming to cost him effort. Surrender the source of the dissonance, the Prometheus facility. Submit to restructuring. Your species will be preserved, contained, studied. Your chaotic potential neutralized. Order will be restored. It was a gilded cage. Sterilization of the human spirit. Thorne looked at Ilara's face on his secondary screen, seeing the same horrified understanding dawning in her eyes. They wanted to kill imagination itself. Your terms are unacceptable, Overseer, Thorne said, his voice steady, cold as the void outside. We choose chaos. Brukal's form seemed to dim. Then you choose dissolution. The transmission cut. Ilara's voice was urgent in Thorne's earpiece. Eris. They're powering up their primary array. Not for tectonics this time. It's a focused harmonic lance. They're going to vaporize Prometheus. We have minutes. Thorne didn't hesitate. Rostova, get every airworthy bird we have. Every drone. Every damn missile that hasn't dissolved yet. We draw their fire. By Ilara time. As Rostova barked orders, Thorne looked up at the obsidian shard hanging in the ash-choked sky. It was preparing its final annihilating note. And deep in the mountains, Ilara Vance was composing humanity's last desperate symphony. The Cathari harmonic lance charged, a vortex of blue energy swirling at the ship's prow, drinking the light from the sky. Thorne's makeshift air force, a handful of patched-together drones, a couple of ancient helicopters jury-rigged with missile pods, even a crop duster loaded with thermite, surged upwards in a suicidal charge. They were gnats against a god. The lance fired. Not at Prometheus. Not yet. It swept across the sky, a wall of disintegrating energy. Thorne's drones vanished like sparks in a gale. The helicopters dissolved mid-turn. The crop duster simply ceased to exist. The lance wasn't just destroying, it was erasing their very presence from reality. Thorne, piloting a battered F-16 that shouldn't have flown, pulled a gut-wrenching evasive maneuver, feeling the air itself tear beside him. He was the last one. Prometheus, status, he yelled into the comms, his voice raw. Ilara's voice came back, strained but focused. Almost there, Aris. The counter-resonance sequence is loaded. But we need a carrier wave. Something powerful enough to punch through their shields at the moment of maximum charge. Something alive. Thorne understood. They needed a sacrifice. A final defiant note played on a human instrument. He looked at the charging lance, then at the coordinates of Prometheus on his HUD. A grim smile touched his lips. For Maya, for the lullaby. He slammed the throttle forward, not away from the lance, but towards it, angling his dying fighter on a collision course with the heart of the Cathari energy vortex. Tell my daughter, I loved her stories, he whispered. He triggered the fighter's last, overloaded comms burst. Not a weapon, but a raw, unfiltered feed of his cockpit audio, his ragged breathing, the scream of tortured metal, the roar of his engines, and beneath it all the faint, looping melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star playing from a cracked speaker. A final human song. The harmonic lance struck the F-16. It didn't dissolve instantly. For a single impossible second, the blue energy writhed around the screaming jet, as if confused by the chaotic mix of fear, defiance, and love radiating from it. Then, with a silent flash that bleached the world white, Eris Thorne and his fighter were gone. But in that instant of chaotic interference, the carrier wave was born. Deep in the bunker, Alara Vance saw the signal spike on her console. Thorne's final human broadcast, amplified 1,000-fold by the Cathari energy itself. Now, she screamed. She slammed her hand down on the console. Project Prometheus unleashed its symphony. It wasn't sound. It wasn't light. It was pure, focused imagination. A torrent of human creativity. Every story of rebellion, every note of defiant music, every equation that defied limits, every tear shed for lost loved ones, every laugh shared in the face of despair, encoded into a resonant frequency that was the absolute antithesis of Cathari order. It rode Thorne's final chaotic carrier wave straight into the heart of the charging harmonic lance. Aboard the Harmony's Resolve, Vrukal felt it hit like a physical blow. The perfect harmony of his ship, his mind, his very being shattered. The creation myth, the serene moment of first harmony, didn't just play in his mind, it fractured. He saw the chaotic energies of his homeworld not as a threat to be silenced, but as a vibrant, beautiful storm. He heard the silenced frequencies not as noise but as a complex, joyful symphony he had been deaf to for millennia. The dissonance wasn't pain anymore, it was revelation. And it was agony. Kalarn, Vrukal pulsed, his signal weak, fragmented. The noise, it is not chaos, it is life. Alarms shrieked across the ship. Crystalline structures, stressed beyond their harmonic limits, began to crack. Not from external force, but from internal contradiction. The core matrix, the bedrock of Cathari existence, resonated with the human counter-frequency, vibrating at a pitch that threatened to tear it apart atom by atom. Kalarn's response was pure, terrified logic. Vrukal, initiate emergency harmonic collapse. Purge the dissonance. Save the order. But Vrukal hesitated. He looked out at the blue-green world below, wreathed in ash, but still alive, still singing its chaotic song. He thought of the conductor losing control of the orchestra, and the orchestra finding its own, more beautiful music. Was order worth the silence, worth the death of this? He made his choice. Instead of purging the dissonance, Vrukal did the unthinkable. He opened the ship's core matrix. He let the human symphony flood in, not as an attack, but as a gift. The Harmony's Resolve didn't explode. It bloomed. Cracks of pure white light spread across its obsidian surface, not destroying but transforming. The rigid geometry softened, flowing into organic, almost floral patterns. The cold blue light of the harmonic arrays shifted, warming to gold, then to the vibrant greens and blues of Earth itself. The ship didn't fall. It unfolded like a crystalline flower opening to an alien sun. On the surface, survivors stared in awe as the instrument of their annihilation became a thing of impossible, breathtaking beauty, hanging silently in the sky, radiating not destruction, but peace. In the Prometheus bunker, Alara Vance slumped over her console, tears streaming down her face, not of sorrow but of overwhelming, disbelieving joy. They hadn't destroyed, they had changed, but the celebration was short-lived. Kalarn, his logic shattered by Vrukal's betrayal, had initiated a failsafe. A final, desperate command pulsed out from the dying heart of the old order, not to the Harmony's Resolve but to the wider galaxy. Alert the Ascendancy Core. Sol's system. Biomass designation. Humanity. Threat level Omega. Weapon Imagination. Recommend Extermination Protocol Theta. The message, cold and absolute, shot outwards at faster-than-light speeds, towards the heart of the Cathari Ascendancy, towards the fleets that guarded the cradle of their civilization, towards the true masters of order. Alara's blood ran cold. They hadn't won. They'd just rung the dinner bell for the entire galaxy. The real war was about to begin. The transformed harmony's resolve hung in Earth's orbit like a silent promise, or a warning. Its obsidian shell now pulsed with soft organic light, veins of gold and emerald tracing patterns that mirrored Earth's continents and oceans. It was no longer a weapon, but a monument, a testament to the moment order had glimpsed chaos and found it beautiful. High Overseer Vakal, his crystalline form now subtly altered, facets shimmering with newfound complexity, maintained a fragile truce. He broadcast only silence, a shield of passive resonance protecting Earth from immediate reprisal, buying humanity precious, desperate time. But the silence was an illusion. The Cathari message, Extermination Protocol Theta, had already pierced the void. It traveled not just to the Ascendancy Core, but to every Cathari outpost, every allied system, every listening post across the spiral arms. Humanity wasn't just a local anomaly anymore. It was designated the galaxy's ultimate threat. The weapon wasn't a planet killer or a supernova trigger. It was imagination, and it had to be erased. On Earth, the fragile hope curdled into grim determination. Lara Vance, her eyes shadowed but burning with fierce resolve, stood before the Global Council, a ragged assembly of survivors, scientists, artists, and soldiers gathered in the reinforced heart of Prometheus. The news from Vakal's fragmented transmissions was dire. "They're coming," Alara stated, her voice echoing in the cavernous chamber. Not one ship, not a fleet, the entire Ascendancy Armada. Thousands of vessels. The might that pacified 100 systems. They believe imagination is a plague, and they intend to sterilize the galaxy of it, starting with us. A murmur of fear rippled through the room. Captain Lena Rostova, her face harder than ever, stepped forward. "We held off one ship with stories and songs. How do we fight thousands? We don't fight them the way they expect," Alara said, her gaze sweeping the room, landing on the artists, the poets, the dreamers. "They come for our weapon, so we give it to them. Not as a shield, not as a counter-frequency. We give them the full symphony." She outlined her plan. It was audacious, suicidal, gloriously, terrifyingly human. They wouldn't hide. They wouldn't build bigger guns. They would broadcast, not just from Prometheus, but from every surviving transmitter, every jury-rigged satellite, every pocket radio jury-rigged to a power source. They would flood the approaching armada not with noise but with the essence of humanity. Every story ever told, every song ever sung, every painting, every equation, every tear, every laugh, every act of courage and kindness and stupid, beautiful love. They would create a resonant field so vast, so complex, so alive with chaotic creativity, that it would engulf the Qatari fleet like a tidal wave of pure imagination. "It won't just disrupt their harmonics," Alara explained, her voice rising with passion. "It will infect them. It will show them what they've lost, what they've sacrificed for their sterile order. We won't destroy them. We'll awaken them, or we'll die trying." Rostova looked skeptical. "And if they just dissolve the signal, dissolve us before it takes hold, then we make sure the signal is carried on something they can't dissolve," Alara said, her eyes meeting Rostova's. "Something they have to light years away." The Cathari armada of purity gathered. 1,000 obsidian shards, each a kilometer long, formed a perfect geometric lattice in the void, humming with the cold, unified resonance of absolute order. At its heart, the core command vessel, the unbroken cord, pulsed with the authority of the Ascendancy Council. High Strategist Zorvax, his crystalline form larger, more rigid than Vakal's ever was, observed the Sol system on his primary display. He saw the transformed harmonies resolve, a grotesque aberration. He saw the chaotic biomass clinging to its death world, and he felt the faint, persistent hum of their broadcasts, a dissonant itch in the perfect harmony. "The anomaly persists," Zorvax pulsed a subordinate. "Vakal is compromised. The biomass weapon, imagination, is active." Zorvax's facets hardened. "Compromise is weakness. Weakness is chaos. Chaos is death. Zorf has fallen to the plague. He will be cleansed. Along with the source, He issued the command. Deploy the harmonic scourge. Prepare for total dissolution of soul system. Leave no frequency unpurged, no thought unerased. The armada began its final approach. A wall of perfect silent death moving towards the blue-green speck. On Earth, the final broadcast began. Not a single signal, but a million. From hidden bunkers, from the ruins of cities, from makeshift antennas on mountains and in valleys, humanity poured its soul into the void. It wasn't just data, it was feeling. The broadcast carried the scent of rain on dry earth, the warmth of a campfire, the sting of tears, the dizzying rush of falling in love, the quiet pride of a parent watching a child sleep. It carried the fury of injustice and the fragile hope of reconciliation. It carried the entire messy, magnificent tapestry of human experience. The Kintari Armada entered the outer edges of the broadcast field. At first, nothing. The perfect harmonics of the fleet held. The Scourge deployed, vast emitters designed to blanket the system in a null frequency, erasing all chaotic signals, all life, all thought. But the human broadcast wasn't a signal to be erased. It was a presence. It seeped into the resonant fields of the Kithari ships like water into cracks in stone. On the bridge of a destroyer near the fleet's edge, a young Kithari technician named Jaren felt a strange warmth, a flicker of an image, not of geometric perfection, but of a sun-dappled forest impossibly green and alive. He heard a fragment of a lullaby, soft and comforting. A dissonance bloomed in his core, not painful but curious. He reached out a crystalline tendril towards his console, not to purge, but to listen. Alarms blared across the fleet. Minor harmonic instabilities. Unexplained sensor ghosts. Crew members reporting sensations. Illogical, impossible sensations. Contain the dissonance. Zorvax roared, his resonance sharp with fury. Purge the infected vessels. Maintain the cord. But it was too late. The infection was spreading faster than they could contain it. The broadcast wasn't attacking their ships. It was speaking to the beings inside them. To the latent potential for chaos, for feeling, for imagination that their rigid order had suppressed for millennia. Aboard the transformed Harmony's Resolve, Rughal watched the approaching armada. He felt the human broadcast wash over him. Not as an attack, but as a homecoming. He saw Zorvax's orders. The purge, the dissolution. He knew what he had to do. He opened a channel not to Earth but directly to the core command vessel. His resonance, now layered with the complex harmonics of his transformation, carried not defiance but sorrow. Zorvax, Verkal pulsed. Brother, listen. Do not cleanse, feel. Traitor Zorvax's response was pure, icy contempt. You are corrupted by the plague. You will be unmade. Verkal didn't flinch. The plague is life, Zorvax. And life is worth the chaos. He didn't fire weapons. He didn't raise shields. Instead, he did the one thing the Kithari could never comprehend. He sacrificed his own transformed harmony. He channeled the entire resonant energy of the Harmony's Resolve, the energy that had protected Earth, the energy of his own awakening. Not as a weapon but as an amplifier. He focused it all, pouring it into the human broadcast, boosting it 1,000-fold, directing it like a beacon straight at the heart of the Armada, at the unbroken cord itself. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The amplified human symphony hit the core command vessel like a physical tsunami of pure, unfiltered being. Zorvax, the epitome of Kithari order, was engulfed. He didn't just hear the forest, he stood in it, feeling the rough bark, smelling the damp earth. He didn't just hear the lullaby. He held a child, feeling its warmth, its trust. He felt the sting of human tears for lost worlds, the soaring joy of human discovery, the terrifying, beautiful weight of human choice. The perfect, unbroken cord of his existence shattered. He didn't dissolve. He screamed. A silent, resonant scream of pure, agonizing revelation that echoed through the entire fleet. Then his crystalline form didn't crack. It bloomed, just as Vakral's ship had, light erupting from within, transforming rigid geometry into flowing organic beauty. The unbroken cord became the first bloom. The effect cascaded. Ship after ship in the Armada, their crews already teetering on the edge of dissonance, were overwhelmed by the amplified symphony. Crystalline forms fractured and reformed. Obsidian hulls softened, bloomed with light and color. The perfect geometric lattice of the fleet dissolved into a chaotic, breathtaking nebula of transforming vessels, each one a unique expression of the awakening within. The harmonic scourge sputtered and died, its null frequency drowned in the tide of life. On Earth, the survivors watched in stunned silence as the wall of death transformed before their eyes, the sky filled not with the cold blue of dissolution, but with the warm, vibrant light of 1,000 blooming stars. The broadcast stopped not because it was silenced, but because it was no longer needed. The message had been received. The infection had taken root. Alara Vance sank to her knees, tears of relief and awe streaming down her face. They hadn't won a war. They had started a conversation, a revolution. But the cost was etched in the faces around her. Heiress Thorn was gone. Countless others were gone. The world was scarred, broken, and the galaxy was now awake to the power of imagination. What would that mean? Weeks later, Alara stood on a hill overlooking the ruins of a city slowly being reclaimed by green shoots. The transformed Cathari ships, now called the Bloom Fleet by humans, hung in orbit, not as occupiers but as guests, awkward, confused, but learning. Recall, his form now a gentle cascade of light and crystal, stood beside her, his resonance a soft hum of shared understanding. We were wrong, the Trekal pulsed. The words simple, profound. Order without chaos is silence, and silence is not peace. It is death. Alara nodded, looking up at the sky where the first stars were appearing. And chaos without order is just noise. The symphony needs both. They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no Cathari artist had ever imagined. But the galaxy was vast. Not all Kaitithari would accept the bloom. Factions would form. Old enemies might see humanity's weapon as a threat to be stolen, not understood. The message of extermination protocol Theta had been sent far and wide. Other civilizations, fearing the power of imagination, might come. As Alara turned to walk back towards the makeshift settlement, a child ran up to her, holding a crude drawing, a picture of a blooming crystal ship next to a human child, holding hands under a rainbow. The child smiled, eyes bright with the unburdened creativity that had saved them all. Alara took the drawing, her heart swelling. The war wasn't over. It might never be. The galaxy was still dangerous, still vast and indifferent in many ways. But humanity had proven its place, not through superior firepower, but through the one thing the universe couldn't replicate, couldn't predict, couldn't silence. The boundless, terrifying, beautiful power of the human imagination. She looked back at the sky, where the Bloom Fleet shimmered like a new constellation. The deadliest weapon in the galaxy hadn't been a supernova. It had been a lullaby, a story, a single defiant act of creation in the face of annihilation. And as long as humans could imagine, they would endure, they would live. The stars watched, silent. But for the first time in millennia, they weren't alone in the dark. The symphony had begun.